The water is cold against his shins, biting into the muscle. The sun is just starting to burn through the thick morning mist. Different locations, different people, different stakes, but the same two words. Most people assume this was a gentle, almost passive invitation. The heavy timber. The imperial bronze are just the visible layers of a deeper allegiance. He always targets the idol. But what happens when the barrier is not something you can touch? What happens when the net keeping you on the shore is completely invisible? You do not fish in the Sea of Galilee. You do not smell like crushed scales and lakeweed. You do not sit at a Roman toll booth counting bronze coins. But you are holding a net. You are clinging to a heavy wooden table. Your hands are full. Your knuckles are white from the strain. You are trying to secure your own tomorrow. You wake up to the harsh, glowing blue light of a screen. You read the email that threatens your security. You feel the sharp, cold knot tightening in your chest. You hustle for the promotion. You scramble for the down payment. You fight for the status. You guard the secret sin. You curate a flawless image. You hoard your resources. You are terrified of what happens if you let go. Then the rabbi walks into your space. He steps into the middle of your anxiety. He interrupts the frantic building of your personal kingdom. We read these ancient encounters through the lens of modern culture, stripping them of their grit. We picture a soft-spoken teacher handing out invitations to a lecture. He looks at the heavy baggage you are dragging through life, and he speaks the exact same two words: follow me. The modern net is not woven from coarse linen. It is woven from the desperate need for control. It is the lucrative career you hate, but will not leave. It is the relationship that actively compromises your soul. It is the social reputation you obsessively maintain. It is the bitter resentment you refuse to forgive. You grip the steering wheel until your hands physically cramp. You stare at the ceiling fan spinning in the dark at 2 a.m. You taste the stale coffee of another sleepless night. You keep the heavy iron armor strapped tight across your chest. You think you are protecting yourself. You think you are keeping yourself safe. But the net is actually keeping you on the shore. The coins are keeping you trapped in the booth. Jesus demands empty hands. You cannot grab hold of his yoke while your hands are full. You cannot walk the keleuthos, the shared road, while tied to the dock. Something has to drop into the dirt. Something has to shatter on the stone floor. Something has to be left permanently behind. The invitation is not a supplement to your current routine, looking for eager volunteers to join a new religious movement. We think of following Jesus as adding a spiritual component to an already established life. It is the execution of your autonomy. It feels like death. It feels like losing absolutely everything. But the hands must be completely emptied before they can be filled. The old contract must be violently torn before the new yoke is placed. Peter dropped the heavy, wet mesh. Matthew abandoned the imperial bronze. They let the old identities fall away. They walked into the unknown. But what happens when someone refuses to let the net drop? What happens when a man looks straight at the rabbi, looks down at his full hands, and decides the cost is simply too high? He runs through the thick, choking dust of a Judean road. The fine, brightly dyed fabric of his tunic catching the hot wind. He is out of breath. He falls hard to his knees, driving his expensive garments into the dirt right in front of the Nazarene rabbi. He is the absolute opposite of the men hauling wet nets on the Galilean shore. And he is a world away from the despised trader, sitting in the Capernaum toll booth. He is the pinnacle of first-century Jewish society, a young, educated, aristocratic ruler holding the deeds to massive generational estates, possessing a flawless religious resume. He looks up at Jesus and asks what he must do to inherit eternal life. We treat it as a shift in personal beliefs. But if you look closer at the dirt, the politics, and the blood of these encounters, Mark's gospel includes a devastating, highly specific detail right before the rabbi answers. The text says that Jesus looked at him and loved him. Jesus sees through the flawless religious exterior, sees the crushing burden of the wealth this young man is carrying, and issues the exact same command he gave to the fishermen. But first, he names the specific net that must be dropped. Go. Sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." The demand is not a fundraising strategy for a new religious movement. It is a desperate rescue mission. Jesus knows that this young ruler is entirely owned by his possessions, trapped behind a fortress of absolute financial security that prevents him from ever truly relying on God. He cannot walk the kaluthos, the shared road of the disciple, while dragging the massive weight of his estates behind him. The hands must be emptied before they can take hold of the rabbi's yoke. But the young man cannot do it. The Greek text says, "His face fell." The word is stignazo, which describes a sky suddenly clouding over with a dark, heavy gloom before a violent storm. The physical, tangible weight of what he is being asked to drop is simply too heavy. He stands up from the dirt. He turns his back on the rabbi who loved him. He walks away, his heavy leather sandals dragging. You realize how dangerous those two words actually were. The call was not a spiritual suggestion. It was the complete dismantling of an identity, slowly down the road, suffocated by his own security. He keeps the wealth. He loses the road. He is the only person in the gospel narratives who explicitly walks away from the direct personal invitation to follow. He refused to let the net drop. But his tragedy raises a terrifying question for the men who did drop their nets. What happens to the fishermen who gave up everything, walked the road for 3 years, and then completely shattered their vows when that shared road led straight to a Roman executioner's cross? We celebrate the first step. We praise the courage of the dropped nets. We admire the abandoned bronze coins. But we rarely talk about the relapse. We rarely analyze what happens when the road breaks you. 3 years pass after that morning on the beach. 3 years of watching miracles. 3 years of walking the shared path. Then comes the arrest in the olive grove. Then comes the panic in the dark. Then comes the courtyard, the warming fire. The 3 desperate denials. The men who left everything suddenly flee. The men who dropped their nets scatter into the shadows. John, chapter 21, captures the devastating psychological aftermath. The text tells us Peter announces to the others, "I am going fishing." He does not mean an afternoon trip to clear his head. He is returning to his former trade. He is walking backward. The real question of these encounters is not where Jesus was leading them. It is this: what did they have to drop to take the first step? He is picking up the exact same heavy, wet mesh he dropped 3 years ago. Because failure always sends us backward. We run back to what we know. We run back to what we can control. When faith breaks, we retreat to the physical. Peter assumes his betrayal is a permanent disqualification. He assumes the aphiemi, the canceled contract, has been reinstated by his own cowardice. He strips off his outer garment. He hauls the ropes. He lets the blisters form on his hands all over again. He hides in the brutal, exhausting anonymity of the labor. But a resurrected rabbi is standing on the shore. Jesus does not send a letter of excommunication. He does not look for a better candidate. He hunts his failing disciple down in the exact place it all started. The Sea of Galilee, the early morning mist, the exact same shoreline. Jesus builds a fire of coals on the sand. The Greek word used here is anthrakia. It is a highly specific term. It appears exactly twice in the entire New Testament. Once in the courtyard of the high priest, where Peter warmed his hands and denied knowing Jesus. And once, right here, on this beach. Jesus perfectly recreates the sensory environment of Peter's greatest failure. The smell of the smoke is an intentional trigger, because every single time Jesus issues this command in the Gospels, it costs the hearer something terrifyingly specific. It is never just a change of mind. It forces the fisherman to face his treason. Jesus cooks bread and fish on the hot coals. He serves the men who abandoned him. Peter tastes the baked fish. He feels the heat of the flames against his wet skin. He hears the voice he publicly denied. Jesus does not demand a theological explanation. He does not extract a promise of future perfection. He asks a single question about love. He asks it 3 times. One for every denial in the dark. A perfectly matched counterweight to the betrayal. And then, Jesus issues the final command of the gospel. Follow me. The exact same 2 words from 3 years ago. The failure did not disqualify the calling. The betrayal did not cancel the road. The second invitation is not a demotion to a lesser status. It is the resurrection of the original covenant. Jesus does not fire his broken disciple. He simply requires him to empty his hands a second time. He demands that Peter let the net fall back into the boat. The disciples learn the terrifying truth about the rabbi's yoke. You can drop the net, you can walk the road, you can fail spectacularly, but the rabbi will always meet you back at the water, and he will ask you to start walking again. But where does this endless, demanding road actually lead the ones who stay on it? It is a severing. It costs a lucrative career. It costs a family name. It costs a social reputation. It costs the illusion of control over tomorrow. 4 fishermen dropped their wet nets in the mud, and the foundation of a kingdom was laid. A tax collector abandoned his table of Roman bronze, and a gospel that outlasted an empire was written. A young aristocrat clung tightly to his generational wealth, and he walked away sorrowful into the dust of history. A terrified disciple denied his rabbi by a high priest's fire, and a bitter rooster crowed in the dark. A resurrected Savior built a second fire on a Galilean beach, and a shattered covenant was beautifully restored. The word akalatheo demanded a shared road toward a shared destiny, and those who walked it found their lives. The word aphiemi required a total cancellation of the past, and empty hands finally grasped the yoke of God. Same command, same cost. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the fire on the beach in John 21, not the original call, but the recalling. The way Jesus intentionally recreates the exact sensory environment of Peter's greatest failure, the distinct smell of the charcoal smoke, the anthracea, that haunted the fisherman's nightmares. He uses the very scent of Peter's treason. Jesus was not asking them to merely agree with his theology. He was asking them to die to everything they had built and step into the unknown, not to punish him, not to shame him, but to give him the space to rewrite the ending of his own worst day. If you are in a season where you feel like you have permanently disqualified yourself from the road, if you dropped the net, walked the path, but then panicked in the dark and went running right back to the very things you swore you had left behind, you do not need to hide in the brutal exhaustion of your old life. The relapse is not the end of your story. It is the exact place he meets you. The rabbi does not stand on the shore with a letter of excommunication. He stands there with a meal. The failure does not cancel the invitation. And may the God who hunts us down in our deepest failures, who waits for us on the shoreline of our relapses, give you the courage to empty your hands one more time. If this opens something up for you today, subscribe. Leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who feels like they have failed too many times to keep walking. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. To feel the absolute shockwave of what happens on this Galilean shoreline, you cannot start with the fishermen. You have to step back into the educational system, on the edge of the Sea of Galilee. And a man is dragging a soaked, heavy linen net toward the shore of 1st century Israel. The men on the beach do not just walk away from a generational family business because a charismatic stranger asked nicely. They walk away because of a childhood rejection they all shared, and a wooden yoke they were told they were never good enough to carry. In the Jewish educational system of the ancient world, you did not simply wake up and decide to follow a rabbi. The process was rigorous, elite, and profoundly exclusionary. By the age of 6, every Jewish boy in a Galilean village sat cross-legged on the cold, hard floor of the local synagogue, swaying back and forth, reciting the Torah until his throat was raw. This was Bet Sefer, the house of the book. They breathed in the chalky dust of the stone and the rich scent of the heavy, animal skin scrolls, committing the foundational texts to memory. But by age 10, the sorting began. The vast majority of these boys washed out. The religious leaders sent them back to their fathers to learn a manual trade to haul nets, to cut limestone, to forge iron. Only the absolute intellectual elite advanced to study the prophets. And of that tiny, brilliant fraction, only the prodigies ever dared to approach a revered rabbi and ask to become his talmid, his disciple. A talmid did not just want to know what the teacher knew. His hands are calloused, deeply stained with crushed scales, lakeweed, and salt. He smells of sweat and dead fish. He is not a philosopher. He wanted to become exactly what the teacher was. He wanted to mimic the way the rabbi washed his hands, the way he argued, the way he bound his sandals. There was a famous Jewish blessing from the era: "May you be covered in the dust of your rabbi." If a student was deemed worthy of this intense proximity, the rabbi would invite him to take on his yoke, his specific, authoritative interpretation of the scriptures. But rabbis did not recruit. They evaluated. They waited for the best to come to them. And they ruthlessly turned away everyone else. The men dragging waterlogged ropes on the shores of Galilee were the rejects of this system. They were the boys who had been sent home. They were the ones deemed not smart enough, not holy enough, not capable enough for the sacred text, relegated to a life of cracked fingernails, and the permanent stench of the lake. They knew their place in the social and religious hierarchy, and it was at the absolute bottom. So when an itinerant rabbi with a growing reputation bypasses the elite theological academies of Jerusalem, walks straight into the mud and the scales of a commercial fishing operation, and says, "Follow me," he is detonating every rule of the religious establishment. He is not asking for casual volunteers. He is overturning a lifelong verdict of inadequacy. The rabbi is telling the rejects that they are capable of carrying his yoke. He is not a theologian looking for a spiritual awakening. He is a blue-collar tradesman calculating the Roman taxes he owes. He is looking at the men the system discarded and declaring, "I believe you can become exactly like me." And to grasp how violently this revelation edits Peter, Andrew, James, and John, you have to watch what happens to their hands the moment the words leave the rabbi's mouth. Jesus walks further down the shoreline. The air is thick with salt and the biting heat of the early sun. Simon and Andrew are casting a circular throwing net into the shallows. It is brutal. Rhythmic work. Shoulders burning. Ankles sinking in the wet sand. Knees bruised against the wooden hull. They are locked in a daily war with the water, just to put bread on the table. Jesus stops. He speaks. "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Look at the immediate physical response. Matthew chapter 4, verse 20 records it in a blur of motion. They do not negotiate terms. They do not ask for a Sabbath off. They do not finish out the afternoon shift. The rope slips from blistered fingers. The heavy, wet mesh collapses into the mud. They step out of the water. They step out of the only economy they have ever known. The net is not just a tool. It is the boundary of their entire world. Jesus walks a few paces further down the beach. He sees another pair of brothers, James and John, the daily quota he must hit, and the survival of his family in a brutal, unforgiving economy. Then, a shadow falls across the wet sand. They are sitting in a boat with their father, Zebedee. The smell of pitch and rotting wood hangs in the air. They are mending torn nets, tying tight knots with calloused thumbs. They are literally repairing the family legacy. Jesus looks at them. The same command, "Follow me." In the ancient Near East, the family structure is everything. Your identity is your father's name. Your future is your father's trade. To walk away from the family business while your father is sitting right next to you is not just a career change. It is social suicide. It is an act of profound public shame. But the response is immediate. They stand up. They step over the wooden gunwales. They jump into the shallow water. They walk away. They leave the boat. They leave the mended nets. They leave Zebedee sitting there in the damp wood with the hired servants, watching his lineage walk down the beach behind a stranger. The boat is not just a vessel of wood and pitch. It is a generational guarantee. 4 men, 2 pairs of brothers, One morning on a Galilean beach, everything they have ever built, everything they have ever relied on, is suddenly left behind them. But to understand the sheer gravitational force of what just happened on this sand, you cannot just look at the physical action. A rabbi is walking along the shoreline. He stops. He looks directly at the fisherman, stepping into his workspace, interrupting his livelihood. You have to look at the exact vocabulary the writer uses to record this moment. There are two specific words hiding in the original text of Matthew's Gospel, and when you see them, you realize these men did not just go for a walk. Matthew chapter 4. Verses dino and vint. We read the English translation and we picture a polite request followed by a brisk walk. But the original Greek manuscript, written on fragile papyrus with dark carbon ink, holds a profound tension that our modern translations completely smooth over. The word Jesus uses when he commands them to follow is the Greek akoloutheo. It appears roughly 90 times in the New Testament, almost exclusively in the Gospels, and its etymology is startling. The word is built from a copulative prefix, a letter indicating union or extreme likeness, and the noun keleuthos, which translates to a road, a path, or a journey. To execute akoloutheo is not to simply walk 10 paces behind a teacher, in polite submission. It implies a joining of fates, an interlocking of destinies where the student and the master walk the exact same terrain toward the exact same ending, regardless of the dust, the thorns, or the ultimate cost. If something about this ancient vocabulary is stirring up questions you have never considered, you are exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week we Kwai, and he speaks two simple words: follow me. This exact collision is going to happen again and again over the next 3 years. Go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. The fishermen cannot take this road without executing the second word hiding in the very next verse. When Matthew records that they left their nets, he uses the Greek verb aphiemi. This word carries a massive conceptual weight in the ancient world. It means to send away, to yield up, to expire, or to completely forsake. It is the exact same word Matthew uses in chapter 6, when Jesus teaches his followers to pray, "Forgive us our debts." To aphiemi, a financial debt is to completely cancel it, tearing the legal parchment in half and letting the pieces fall to the stone floor. It is a total, irreversible severing of a binding contract. When Peter and Andrew aphiemi their nets on the wet sand, they are not taking a temporary sabbatical. They are divorcing their past. They are tearing up the contract they had with their previous identity. That route changes everything. The call to follow is not a casual addition to an already crowded life. It is a complete severance from everything that defined you yesterday. The Galilean fishermen dropped their only means of survival into the dirt because the call demanded empty hands. But walking away from a struggling blue-collar trade is one thing. The command is about to hit someone who has entirely insulated himself with Roman wealth, and his hands are currently full of imperial bronze. A hated man sitting at a customs booth, counting out imperial bronze coins. A wealthy aristocrat standing in the middle of a dusty Judean road. The toll booth sits on the edge of the major trade route, running through Capernaum, choking on the dust of passing caravans. The air smells of pack animal sweat and baked mud. A man named Levi Matthew sits behind a heavy timber table. He is listening to the constant, rhythmic clink of stamped metal. He is collecting taxes for Herod Antipas, backed by the suffocating military weight of Rome. To secure this position, Matthew had to sell out his own blood. He had to look his neighbors in the eye and extort them to line the pockets of an occupying empire. He is wealthy. He is protected. He is universally despised. Then, the rabbi from Nazareth walks up to the timber table. He does not hurl a stone. He does not spit in the dirt. He looks at the wealthy trader, and he speaks the exact same 2 words he gave to the fishermen. Follow me. The response defies human survival instincts. Luke's gospel records the moment with devastating brevity. and leaving everything, he rose and followed him. Matthew does not ask for time to close out the ledger. He does not lock the heavy iron cash box. A grieving son asking for time to bury his father. A group of exhausted men eating breakfast in silence around a charcoal fire. He does not wait for a Roman guard to relieve his post. He stands up. He steps out of the booth. He leaves the imperial bronze sitting in the sun. This is not a career transition. It is a social execution. When Matthew walks away from that heavy wooden table, he is burning the only bridge he has left in the world. The Romans do not tolerate a commissioned tax collector abandoning his post. To Rome, it is an act of rebellion. The Jewish community will never welcome him back into the synagogue. The stain of his treason does not wash off. By walking away, Matthew makes himself an enemy of the empire while remaining an outcast to his own people. He has absolutely nowhere else to go. His only safety, his only identity, his only future, is the rabbi walking in the dirt ahead of him. The fishermen dropped their nets because the nets were their survival. Matthew drops the coins because the coins were his fortress. Every time Jesus issues the call, he demands the one thing the hearer is using to insulate themselves from trusting him. The physical objects, the wet linen.